Thank you. That's running over.
Good morning, Marina, and good morning to everybody else. Gulf Harbour Radio back here with you. Now that the wires have been fixed, this is ZMH 286, and we now have winter. Although the temperatures wouldn't say that, it's 18 degrees out there, but it's boy, is it stormy in New Zealand today, the 13th of May. Strong southwest gusts. It sort of hovers about 12, burst up to 20. It's been pretty strong outside. Up north, 1010.9 and rising very steeply after the low has gone past us. So, yeah, very stormy weather, but we managed to get a morning in when we shot off to go shooting yesterday, and it was dry, and then the rain, boy, the rain came down. How many mils did we get? About 10 mils. 14 mils, so our tanks are feeling very happy about that. So, yeah, very, very strong conditions, and the ideas last week that people would be all moving off today sort of got canned, and we'll be looking at what David's got for the rest of the week. But certainly it will be a different passage window than the last one where you all left in mild conditions and it got stronger. This looks like it will be a reverse conditions, and it will mellow out a bit. But anyway, you can cover that later. We've had some interesting emails in, and good morning to everybody. I know the folk in Minerva are probably looking to go over the next day or so as well. David sent out an email yesterday covering what he looked at passage weather, and I had a lot of CCs of people that I knew were going to go from New Zealand, and the initial burst, the CCs or the BCCs didn't go through, which I was lucky to find out from John on Exocet Strike. But I think I've copied everyone, and if I did miss somebody off, my apologies, but something hiccuped in the internet system there. But anyway, you're all looking to get going anyway over the next few days. Of course, there's some people that are still going. We've got Alcyon out there. Boy, are they having a difficult trip trying to get to Ryder Bay. But they sound as if they're in good spirits, and they're ripping along at the moment. 9 knots. Good morning to you guys, Jan and Jordan. Just a difficult trip for you guys, but it looks like they're surviving on red cabbage, white wine and foie gras. So it seems it must be all okay there. They keep raving about this red cabbage. Maybe that's part of the driving system for Alcyon, or that cabbage, particularly if they've got beans as well. But anyway, good morning to you guys and everybody else. It sounds like radio conditions are good this morning, so hopefully the internet system is good as well. Yes, it was quite funny on Friday, the big hole in the ground with the absolutely shredded wires, and on the same day that this happened, we got a little letter saying fibre is now going to be available, so we'll have to be investigating that this week. I'll probably leave the rest of the news of boats, and we'll see what's happening with the weather. But is anybody wanting to check in at this stage? Please call. We had good signal from Port Vila. That's where Mr. Troy is at the moment. So good morning to everybody else. Well, just a bit of news. It's good that a lot of you are going to be leaving the country this week, as it will help balance out the net migration, which is soaring evidently. It's about over 6,000 extra people, 61,000, should I say, 61,600 extra people per year. So we could do with losing a few. The intentions-based cards that they have at airports, we had to fill in these stupid cards at the airport when you arrive. Well, they've been scrapped now, and what the statistics department are doing are looking at outcomes-based data. Mind you, they haven't done too well with assembling data based on the absolute fiasco of the census last year. But it does look as if we're going to be reaching 5 million people this in the next few months, which is absolutely astounding.
That's
because
ridiculous.
Every time I think of New Zealand, I think, of 3.5 million, and that's what it was when David first arrived in the country. But you can certainly tell from the road situation that we are at the 5 million mark coming up very shortly.
Yeah, they're all here on one.
Yeah, they're all around our area in their cars. But I'll talk about that more tomorrow, is the differences between 1900 and 2019. One interesting thing, bottled water was the most successful mass market beverage category in 2018. 53 billion litres sold in the USA alone. Can you imagine it? Bottled and canned water. The latest is what they call liquid death. And this is in a very interesting can with skulls and skeletons all over it. And it costs $22 US for a 12-can pack. Boy, that's absolutely incredible. It's 100% alpine, non-carbonated water. It's slightly alkaline, a pH of 8.2, which reminds me of how lovely the water. When we were in Italy, we were at San Remo, and so our water at the dock came from the mountains. It was very high in minerals. In fact, when I put the meter from the water maker onto it, it would absolutely fail if you were looking at your water maker. It was so high, but boy, was it delicious. Absolutely lovely, lovely water. I wouldn't have thought water would be so different, but indeed it is different. It was fantastic water. And that reminds me, don't ever use your water maker water for batteries. I know probably you don't have lead acid batteries anymore, but boy, if you use your water maker water for the batteries, they won't last very long, because of course you do need ions in the battery water. So if you don't have distilled water, the best thing to do is just use ordinary tap water, boil it so you've got no microbiological problems. And if you need to worry about any particulates, just put it through a coffee filter, but don't ever use your water maker water. And in fact, there's some health problems using water maker water for a long time, and when everything settles down, I will discuss that on the net one morning, because you don't have much choice when you live on a water maker, as we did for many, many years. All right, for those who think they're fit, a Nelson female doctor, I think she was originally a Brit when she was born, but anyway, she's a doctor in Nelson. She's just won New Zealand's toughest, is a new ultra running race. It's worldwide, but the one in New Zealand was just run. She survived as the last person standing, male or female. She ran for 30 hours, 30 hours, 201 kilometres. It's an interesting rules. It's sort of in a rough track, and evidently this track through the forest was a bit more difficult than it should have been. But anyway, the rules are that you have to complete 6.7 kilometres per hour. What's that, about 5 miles, I suppose. It's a very, very tough race, and it's just survival of the fittest. So this lady goes to Tennessee in, I think it's October. The two men were second and third. One was quite a few laps behind at 28. But imagine running for 30 hours. Boy, interesting race. Mm-hmm. Well, going from one race to another, Scott Dixon came in second in the IndyCar race in the weekend. Absolutely very, very exciting race. He was passed in the penultimate lap by a Frenchman, Simon Pagenaud. And it was very interesting. He just swung a little bit wide on one corner, and the Frenchman gave him a little nudge, and he was sort of a little bit out of control. He screamed past.
Oh, they're protesting.
Yeah, David reckons it was protest material, but I don't. I think it was just really good, tough racing. Anyway, he's certainly still up there with the leaders. The Eurovision Song Contest is on in Tel Aviv at the moment. It's incredible. I would actually like to have television for something like that. There's 200 million plus viewers worldwide. It is the most watched non-sports event in the world. And it's pretty spectacular. I think we saw it once when we were in Europe. I can't remember where it was then, but it's on in Tel Aviv at the moment. Of course, being in the Middle East, it's getting a lot of dispute. But anyway, nobody will worry about that if you're watching it. And I'm sure there'll be some fantastic competition. In Europe, our Prime Minister Prime Minister Ardern is meeting with PM Macron this week in a rather large meeting.
The Three Stooges.
You can keep your comments to yourself. To discuss ways of stopping online violence. This all resulted from the Christchurch massacre, which was actually streamed online. It's really, really hard to believe that someone would be that warped to do something like that. And several of the social media companies are sending representatives to this meeting to see what can be done. But boy, everyone is really struggling with the problem between what shouldn't be on and what shouldn't be restricted is getting very, very hard to respond to quickly. So anyway, that's on, I think, on Wednesday. The rest of the international news is a bit boring. The usual stuff from America with Mr. Trump's tax reports everybody wants. God knows why. We should just let him get on with the job of running the country. But anyway, there's that on and various other very boring stuff which I won't bother telling you about. So let's have a quick stream at a quick look at what's going on. Quite a few people. I didn't realise that local talent's going to Vanuatu. Quite a few people are going to Vanuatu this year. It's our favourite actually. So you'll really enjoy that, particularly if you get right up the north. A report from the that was interesting. Whistler sent in something. They're still at South Minerva, I think. I presume they're South Minerva. Yep, 23,179. The wind is easterly from there. Good morning to you folk there. I think we've got Kapiri and Pilgrim and Midnight Sun. It's an easterly wind, about 8 knots, 21 degrees, which is not all that much warmer than here. We're at 18 degrees. But evidently a very large red buoy has washed up on I presume, the easterly side of South Minerva, 6 metres tall. When floating, it's over 10 metres long from end to end. So I've actually reported that through to Maritime Radio and the RCC. It will probably float off again in a high tide and rough seas, so it will be a bit of a nuisance out there. So, but evidently quite interesting to see. So that's about it. I'm scanning through yet, and we've got Bla Eleanor on their way, and I think who else was on their way? Let me have a quick look at the emails. Mezzaluna. I always confuse you two. They're heading to Savu Savu with an east-southeast of 6 knots, 70% cloud cover and 1018. And pretty much the same as Bla Eleanor, who are going to Savu Savu. They've got 15 to 20, gusting 25. Bit of seas out there, waves 2.5 metres. So
what was that one again?
That's 15 to 20, gusting 25. So
what's the other one?
they are at about 20 south and 1, or almost on the date line. I think they left yesterday from Minerva. So that was on Cruisersat.net. Okay, I'll just put another pause to see if anyone wants anything, and then we'll get on to the weather.
Okay.
You can introduce yourself.
Alrighty, good morning, and interesting your reports. I'm very interested in the winds that you're getting for those yachts that are not only at Minerva but departing to the islands. I've been trying my best to get the ASCAT swath, in other words, the microwave satellite that gives me the exact wind speed and direction. And I think it was late last week, we were getting reports of 35 to 40 knots, and I could not find it. I was pulling down the best I could, the closest I could get. I never could get directly over the location of the yachts reporting that. And I'm not trying to say they're giving me wrong information or anything of that nature, but I'm wanting to see the verification with the satellite. Right now, though, I do have a good swath, and the report that we just got is dead on. These satellites are accurate unless there's a malfunction in the satellite itself or the processing of the data. So what they do is they give you a very, very complete bit of data on the wind direction and the speed, and that's precisely what they report is what the satellite is picking up. I'm also looking at Tropical Cyclone Ann. I'll talk about that in a minute. I've got a couple of screens going here, and I'm actually looking at the eye of Ann, the center eye. Very interesting. Well, anyway, a tumultuous Sunday for sure. Yesterday, that's as we predicted. The upper levels showed then a severe, and do now really, a severe 500 millibar trough that is over New Zealand, and that's followed by a ridge, as you would expect, and then another trough is pushing up through the Oz Bight. And the result of these driving forces are reflected by a very intense depression over New Zealand, pushing fronts and troughs northwards and creating gale force winds pretty much over the country last night. They've eased considerably now. Now, the upper ridge has created a surface high pretty much over southeast Australia, with the next nasty looking depression just to the southwest of Tasmania. By lunch, our current depression, its center is going to move just to the southeast of New Zealand, and we're looking at 977 millibar. Trish, what did we get on our barometer last night?
008.
Yeah, we didn't quite, obviously with the center being considerable distance away, we had higher pressures, but still dropped like a rock, for sure. Anyway, this is a brute of a storm. Frontal bands, and there's several, pushed up onto the cruising routes, extending all the way to New Caledonia. And one in particular links up with Ann, Tropical Depression Ann. And yes, the disturbance that we've been talking about over the last couple of week and a half, has made the big time. Officially a tropical depression. It's weak, but it's there. It's official. Centered near 16 and 159 east. Now, deep convection in this is allowing, they think, for further intensification. That's probably going to get a little bit stronger, but I don't think much. And the good part is it's moving in the direction of Australia and not in the direction of Yates, where we are in Newcastle and Vanuatu. So that's all pretty good news. So that track is certainly away from us. All very interesting, I'm sure you're saying, but what about departure from New Zealand? We talked about, Friday, we talked about the Monday, this was Thursday, we talked about the Monday departure. As Patricia said, I sent out yesterday afternoon an analysis of what I thought and whatnot. And in a nutshell, we made it pretty clear that Chameleon, our yacht, would not be going today. But I'm seeing, looking at data just offshore from Opua, westerly winds 20 to 30 is right now, one little spot right there. But Cape Reinga, just got an actual report from Cape Reinga, and that's 30 knots there out of the southwest. So due to the orographics, we're getting winds from slightly different directions, but they are strong today. You really wouldn't want to be out there in these conditions, that's for sure. By evening today, we should be looking at southerlies about 20 knots plus. So virtually the entire day is going to be quite breezy. And also showers, we're getting just stopped. But a few minutes ago, we were getting some rain showers here at Gulf Harbor. Now, tomorrow morning, I see a shift to southeast 15, easing to maybe 10 knots or so by lunch. And taking a look at Wednesday, if you left tomorrow, Wednesday will move you north a little bit. we're looking at possibly westerlies, fairly light, in closer to New Zealand, shifting to southerlies up around 33 south, and by late on Wednesday, southwest 20 from North Cape up to 33 south. Then we get a shift to, it's all over really. We're looking at southerlies. We see southwest. We see a little bit of southeast. It really is everywhere at that point. Anyway, by Friday at 30 south, we're looking at anywhere again from southwest to southeast winds, but light. We're looking at about 10 to 15 knots. So there's nothing out there at that point in time. From Tuesday right through Friday, pretty mellow as you head north, and probably continuing southeast right through Sunday, 10 to 15 knots. Now remember, this is a mean wind that I give, so my usual formula is plus or minus 5 knots on the number that I give you, and gusts are 40 to 50% of the mean wind. Now, in addition, on Sunday, the 19th, in other words, next Sunday, winds to the west of New Zealand are 35 to 40 knots. For those of you that are wondering about delaying the trip even more. So these are all coming from this depression that we just talked about that's moving east. The center of it is to the south, but we're getting cyclonic circulation all throughout New Zealand through Sunday the 19th. So that near North Cape, as an example, we could be looking at west to west northwest, 25 to maybe even 30 knots. Not very nice. However, if you're north of 30, and if you leave tomorrow, you would be north of 30 by then. It's going to be quite pleasant. So in summary then, I'll say it again, Chameleon would not leave today. We would not depart today, but delay it to tomorrow, Tuesday. The winds look favorable through the 22nd. There will be some convective activity up in the islands around that time. That's really a bit too far out to be sure the degree of this, but looking at the various models, you can see that they are calling off convective activity. But the winds don't look particularly strong. Now, during this window, we'll call it, starting tomorrow, we're going to find what I call embedded troughs in the ridge. So we've got, if you were to look at a synoptic map, and again, I hope you are getting these maps from New Zealand, Met Service. Anyhow, you'll see embedded troughs within the ridge. It's quite common down here in the Southwest Pacific, and they're going to be covering the cruising routes. So I just want you to be aware of squally conditions when these go through. The squalls are always worse at night, so just be aware of that. And referring again to Tropical Cyclone Ann, while it's not a threat from New Cal to Tonga, bear in mind that it did form outside the official tropical cyclone season. So there's a lesson for you there. And this has happened many times before. So while we have a quote-unquote season, tropical cyclones have occurred, I believe, virtually every month of the year historically. So there you go. Always keep your eyes open. Now, I can hear it as loud as if somebody were sitting right next to me. What if I delay to later in the week? Trish has already gotten a couple of emails. This never fails. So, therefore, the other lesson is when a window does present itself, you really may want to think about taking it. Now, a delay this week is going to see some fresh winds over Okoa and even downstream looking forward on the 23rd and 24th. We talked about possible convective activity. It could be worse by the 23rd and 24th. So that means a rather unpleasant arrival. Again, too far out to be sure, but anyhow, that's how the models are leaning for that point in time. So if there's a valid reason for delaying, obviously you don't have any choice. But if you're just being lazy, well, you just want to think about this carefully. So our view is if it's a model that models that indicate a window, go for it. Now, we'll look at the islands very, very briefly here. Don't want this too long. Brief look at Tonga first. Tonga Met has got wind warnings up again, strong wind warnings for the entire group. So expect southeast 15 to 20 rising to 2025. A little bit less tomorrow would appear. Fiji Met also has strong wind warnings in place, east to southeast 20 to 25, and they'll be easing a little bit later in the day. Tomorrow, southeast 15 to 20. And I do see broken cloud moving in from the east to the west. So there's a good chance of scattered showers through areas of Fiji. And Vanuatu is getting residual cloud from tropical cyclone Ann. Mostly broken. However, the winds are and have been fresh to strong. Those of you that are in Vanuatu now will certainly verify this. Expect southeasterly winds 20 to 25 knots, and seas are getting up to 3 meters. Very unpleasant out there. For those new to Vanuatu and new to listening to us, we always talk about the seamounts that are in between the islands and Vanuatu. In other words, what winds up happening is the seas actually are rougher than the winds would indicate they should be. And that's because of the currents and so forth that are subsurface hitting these seamounts, and these waves do mount up. It gets very, very nasty inter-island in Vanuatu. We could attest to that for sure. Southeast winds, I think I said 20 to 25, and seas 3 meters. So there you go. 3 meter seas inter-island. That's very, very rough. Now for New Caledonia, imagery shows plenty of cloud, again from Ann, tropical cyclone Ann. The winds, though, are light to moderate. In our lagoon area, I would expect east-southeast about 15, increasing maybe to 20 later today. Tomorrow, southeast 20 to 25, and a possibility of brief showers, not only today, but a better chance tomorrow. What else? Oh, the Minerva yachts. I talked about that in my email to those yachts yesterday, but for other people's interest, if you're in Minerva, virtually any time now you can depart for Tonga or Fiji. Today and tomorrow, for instance, is quite fine with southeast winds developing around 15 knots. Even through Friday, there's no problem at all. You could expect some convective bands as you're heading up to whichever group you're going to, but nothing really dire that I can see. And again, we talked about the microwave satellite and why not being able to verify these 30 to 40 knot winds. I'm not saying they don't happen, but I just haven't seen it. When you give us reports like that, I in particular would like to know about the cloud conditions. In other words, are you getting these strong winds as a function of squalls or a function of just tall cumulus clouds? We call them cumulus congestus, really tall cumulus. They're not quite CVs, but they're just big, big clouds. Downflow from those clouds could easily get up to 30 knots, maybe 40, because they're pulling down wind from the altitude of the cloud. And of course, it's always windier higher up in the atmosphere than it is on the surface. So if you would do that, that would be appreciated. So that's about it from me. Any questions or comments? come now, and we'll carry on again tomorrow.
Well, we do have a question, and that relates to the wave height and swell conditions for the first couple of days. If this is from boat in Marsden Cove, if they departed from Marsden today, at, late in the afternoon, say 3 o'clock, what would they be faced with in terms of the sea conditions? So we'll let them cogitate on a different screen for that one. Is there anybody, whilst he's looking, is there anybody else with anything, please call? Sometimes we wonder if we're talking to ourselves. Just as well we've got people like Local Talent and them. Well, we've got them on streaming, but if you are listening out there, it would be good. Actually, the other thing is, for those that are looking to go, please make sure that somebody is following you. We got a call in the weekend because a boat that Maritime Radio had been following on the AIS, knowing it was fairly rough and it was a small boat going to New Caledonia, and all of a sudden the AIS stopped transmitting before they had actually got inside the pass. Please make sure that you are reporting in either on the radio to Maritime Radio. You can do that at any time, or you can fit into one of the skids from Northland Radio. Or you can email your position into the YIT site or CruiserSat.net, or just email us. But make sure somebody is following you, please. It just makes it a lot easier when things hiccup, and they do hiccup. So make sure that you don't put other people to an awful lot of work. So I'll just pass the microphone, because Local Talent asked about the sea conditions. It does sound, from what David has been talking, that it's at least a 2-bag trip for the first couple of days. I always looked at conditions based on the number of sick bags that I got through, and certainly when David was talking about the inter-island between Port Vila and Erromango, it was definitely a 2-bag for me in most conditions. Anyway, here's David.
Yeah, well, this is kind of interesting. To the west of New Zealand, just follow me on this. It's going to sound maybe confusing. But between Taranaki and North Cape, just offshore there, we're looking at 6.5 meters. Now, that's to the west of this line, if you were to draw it. Now, what happens is this swell kind of wraps around the top of the North Island. So this, we'll call it a primary swell, if you will start coming down from the northwest. And real close to New Zealand, it's not much at all. So we'll talk about what things are like, say, 50 to 75 miles offshore. And what I'm seeing is about 3 meters. 3 meters. Now, we're getting two different wave trains. We're getting this swell that's basically coming from the northwest to the southeast as it bends around the top of the North Island. And then we're getting the actual sea due to the wind, and that's coming from the southwest. So you're getting, it's not a cross sea per se, but you're getting a build-on effect. So these wind-driven waves are trying to climb on top of the swell and creating these heights that we're talking about, 3 meters. Now, further on, if you could magically get, say, to 33 south, the seas are 4.5 meters. 4.5 meters right now. Now, looking at, let's say, Wednesday, we'll look at.
No, they won't. Today, tomorrow, and the next day.
Yeah, but Trish says they're interested in today. Well, again, just leaving, it's not bad, but then getting a little bit further offshore, it's just what I said. But the Wednesday time frame, as an example, it drops off very, very quickly. So that maximum 2.5 meters, 2 to 2.5 meters from New Zealand, out a couple of miles, 10 miles out to maybe 50 to 100 miles out. You're looking at 2 to 2.5 meters. Further north, it's back up to 3 meters again because you're getting the residuals from this large load to the south. So I hope that answers your question. It's they're pretty good size sea and swell out there, but they're not on the nose per se. So there you go.
Well, I'm a bit confused, but I would definitely be taking my seasick pills before departure by the sound of it. And that means you have to take plenty of kiwi fruit. Kiwi fruit is very, very good for constipation. Now, we cover all sorts of things on this net, but if you take seasick pills, as I always have to take seasick pills, you do get constipated. And so you need something to counteract the constipation. And kiwi fruit is the most palatable thing to have for constipation. I couldn't take lots of water because it would just come back up again, but for some reason, kiwi fruit works. So make sure if you are going to challenge your bodies, and let's face it, when we've been sitting around for 6 or 7 months in marinas and nice placid New Zealand anchorages, then you are going to notice the 2.5 metre swell, and you will need to take something to alleviate the problem.
I give a sea update.
Okay, another sea update. Passing the mic.
Righto, so let's look at Friday. Say you've gone tomorrow, or leaving tomorrow, and by Friday you're getting up there considerably. If you're on, say, run line to Tonga or Fiji, the seas are a little bit less. Believe it or not, New Zealand is actually having that effect. At least the models are telling us that. So that you'll be looking at probably 2.5 meters. If you're going to Vanuatu or New Caledonia, it's different. You're going to be looking at initially about 3.5 meters, and then it drops to 3. And then on Friday, if you were to magically be upon the reef at New Caledonia, it would be 2 meters. So you can see how it's progressively coming down. But yeah, it's not flat calm out there. That's for sure. This is a horrific storm with a lot of wind, so driving up the seas considerably. Yeah, not nice.
Well, I'm glad we're going to be sitting here listening to you and reading your reports, but at least it's a workable passage, and it's the wind is in the right direction and the seas are in the right direction, even though they're a bit high. Any questions, or we'll leave you all to cogitate on what your bodies can cope with? Anybody else? Any relays from anybody? I do copy. I missed the boat name. It's not all that clear, but go ahead. Yep, got you, and go ahead with your question. From where?
I can't understand.
Boy, it's very strong, but I'm just struggling with the clarity. You're 22 miles from somewhere. 22 miles from Oh, got you now. 22 miles from Tongatapu. Yeah, just reducing that power bit made a big difference to the clarity. Okay, 22 miles from Tongatapu. And what are your conditions, over? Okay, so for those that are on their way to Tongatapu, and I know Blair Eleanor is 22 miles away, 10 knots east-southeast, 10 knots east-southeast, and the seas have dropped to 2 meters. and it's a bit on the cloudy side. So thank you for that report. I missed the comment at the end. Over. Oh, well, we're copying you now quite well, but I still haven't got your boat name. So say again the boat name. Over. Essence, I think. Right, yeah, it's interesting because it's a strong signal, but it's just not all that sharp, but very strong signal. So, well, you're certainly got to Tongatapu. Sounds like a good trip, so thank you for that, and thank you for the report too. David is just having a look, because it's always useful to check real actuals with what his models are saying, and that's why we do appreciate people calling in. Thank you for that, and he's just going to want the microphone back.
No, it's just to mention that that report is in agreement with both EC and GFS. As you get a little bit closer to Tongatapu, or if you've magically got up to the Hapais, there'd be a little bit more wind, I think, about 15 knots, 1.5. But apart from that, I'm very pleased to see that the models seem to be in agreement. So anyway, good job. Enjoy Tonga.
Okay, is there anybody else? All right, well, that's about it. It should be interesting to know how efficient the check-in procedure is at Tongatapu. Sometimes it can be a bit annoying, but arriving on a Monday morning, they should be good, full of energy. I remember when we went into Tongatapu once, it was as rough can be. We couldn't get in our dinghy. We anchored reasonably close, and we were going to and fro, big mummers, as the wind kept changing, and then we got a message that we had to come in, and we sort of thought, well, I wonder if they could come and help get the dinghy off the deck, because it was blowing 25 knots and raising our very heavy dinghy. But anyway, we finally got in, and the guy said, oh, I need to come to the boat. And so we looked at him. He was about 2 ton in his underwear. And so we walked down to the dinghy, and he looked at the dinghy, and he looked at the water conditions, and he decided to do the paperwork right there and then. And so we never did get visitors. All right, people, it's all yours. The frequency is yours. Good conditions today. And we will be back again in the morning. Have a good day. Do your final prep if you're leaving. And we shall be there again, here again in the morning. Cheers all. We're clear.